Of course, Epstein. No lists, no charges, no accountability, just more silence.
The question is, why is Trump part of the cover-up?
Thousands of young girls who were abused. There's never any accountability for this stuff. It would be all of the people who've never had justice, who were waiting. And my heart just breaks for those people.
This is an absolute failure on messaging, on substance. They should not have done this way.
The catastrophic flood that swept through Texas over July 4th weekend, it wasn't just politicians saying the victims got what they voted for.
Jeez. This should have been a moment of national unity.
Right.
And instead, it's devolved into this exchange of race baiting and throwing hate at each other.
I can't believe she said that.
What?
I cannot
The little
believe
girls
children?
who are dead,
Yeah.
she
dead
called them
girls.
see you next Tuesday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're getting to the big, beautiful bill.
This is a disaster from a financial point of view.
It sure is. The Medicaid system is robbed of $1 trillion.
I think with regard to the work requirements,
The work requirement argument is total bullshit. So this is
So
the
it's
way
like,
I
I
see
need
it.
these
It
concrete
takes
things
from
for
the
people.
poor to give to the rich. How
but then
many
they
aren't
won't
working?
lose their
And I believe
benefits,
that
though.
it's also
but you're
like
saying they cut the money.
I'm gonna lose my mind. If they cut $1 trillion from the system, they're fucked. That's
Okay.
the point of
All right, welcome to Her Take. I'm kind of excited. I'm not going to lie. We have no guest today because I have such strong, credible opinions from my ladies here, and I get to hear more from you. So there's a lot on deck. Let's jump right in. Now, in the wake of the Texas floods and the Camp Mystic tragedy, some liberal politicians rushed to inject race into the narrative. So we're going to discuss why is race baiting such a powerful political tool, and what toll is it taking on the nation's unity? And then, of course, there are climate change headlines that are claiming this is what's behind natural disasters like the Texas flood itself, along with Floridian hurricanes, Californian wildfires. Now, there are some that argue it's a lot deeper than that, and there's a more complex truth. We're going to litigate all of that. Then the American Party. Why did Elon launch it? What does this mean for the future of U.S. politics? Anna's going to be giving us the latest rundown on Trump's trade deals. Amy's telling us what we can expect from the slimmed-down version of the BBB, for better or for worse. But first, of course, Epstein. After years of speculation, investigations, and public outrage, the DOJ and the FBI now claim there's nothing more to see. No lists, no charges, no accountability, just more silence. Anna? WTF?
Oh, well, there's a lot, so buckle up. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a ride. I want to give everyone the full context of what's going on, beginning with the fact that Donald Trump campaigned on the notion that he would be releasing the Epstein files, the client list, basically everything that's been withheld from the American people. And unfortunately, that doesn't look like it's going to happen. The Department of Justice, as you mentioned, and the FBI have basically closed the Epstein case, stating that he did kill himself in prison in 2019, that there is no client list, there's nothing to release. But honestly, that's not what we heard from Attorney General Pam Bondi. In fact, she was saying this during her interview with Jesse Waters on Fox News months ago. Take a look.
You said last week that you have the Epstein files on your desk. When can we see them, and what's taking so long to release them?
I do. Jesse, there are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims. 200. So we have well over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information. But other than that, I think tomorrow, the personal information of victims. Other than that, I think tomorrow, Jesse, breaking news right now, you're going to see some Epstein information being released by my office.
What kind? Are we going to see who was on the flights? Are we going to see any evidence from what he recorded? Because he had all of his homes wired with recording devices.
Yeah. What you're going to see, hopefully tomorrow, is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information. But it's pretty sick what that man did.
Okay. Well, we'll
along
look for
with his
that.
co-defendant.
Absolutely. And he had help. That's for
He
sure.
sure did.
All right. So, I mean, she's very specific about what she's planning on releasing. This is in February. Literally the next day, she pulls this stunt with right-wing influencers. I want to show you a photo of what I'm talking about. This is one of the posts on X that shows, these are the right-wing influencers who were given these folders that were allegedly containing the Epstein files, the client list, all of the information that isn't public. But the influencers went through it and they're like, this is all stuff that we already had access to. This is already public. There's nothing new here. But Bondi continued to go on the record to acknowledge the existence of the very evidence she now claims doesn't exist. So here's yet another video of her saying the same stuff. Take a look.
DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
All right.
Not yet.
So she says that she's seen it. She has it on her desk. They just need to redact names. They want to protect people's identity, meaning the victims. But then there's yet another example. I mean, she's on the record so many times, ladies, saying that I'm going to release it. She was caught having dinner with a friend and someone was eavesdropping, overheard her talk about all of the information she has, how she's going through like thousands of documents. Let's go to yet another example, Nat.
And the FBI handed over a couple hundred pages of documents. But, you know, Sean, I gave them a deadline of Friday at 8 a.m. to get us everything. And a source had told me where the documents were being kept. Southern District of New York, shock. So we got them all by, hopefully all of them, Friday at 8 a.m., thousands of pages of documents. I have the FBI going through them, and Cash is also, now that we have Cash here, it's a game changer, of course, and Cash is going to, Director Patel, is going to get us a detailed report as to why the FBI withheld all of those documents.
Okay.
Now, look, we're giving Pam Bondi a lot of heat as the Attorney General. We should also note that FBI Director Dan Bongino was engaged in a lot of tough talk prior to actually having MAGA hold his feet to the fire on this issue. Let's go to Dan Bongino and what he said of this investigation. This is on Tim Pool's show, and he talks about how Epstein was an intelligence asset, which is important to this story. Take a look.
About a year and a half after that, I'm in a green room at Fox, and I'm not going to say who because they didn't give me permission to share it, but the short story, but not who they are. It says, you know, Epstein's an intelligence asset for people in the Middle East, right? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. I'm like, you sure of that? The person, let's say, is like, I'm absolutely sure of that. That he's either a witting or unwitting asset, intelligence asset, meaning his plane and that island, the cameras, there's a big assumption out there that these videotapes were exclusively in the custody of Epstein. That's a huge mistake. The reason they wanted this story to go away is because there's an assumption like, oh yeah, Epstein had him. No, he wasn't the only one who had him, according to this source. These assets, that's why this blackmail story makes so much sense. Which Middle Eastern countries they are, I don't know. But this person, who's a very, very good reporter, I mean, aces, right? Swore Epstein was either a witting or unwitting intelligence asset, and they may have had his plane wired up, and they're the ones who have all this stuff. So,
okay, so the huge conspiracy theory here is that Epstein was working for intelligence, Mossad and CIA, and that this child sex ring was really a blackmail operation in order to basically obtain blackmail on powerful elite individuals in the United States government and potentially elsewhere as well. Now, I want to go to this Mike Benz tweet real quick because if you guys can remember, Jeffrey Epstein was prosecuted in like the early aughts, right? And in 2008, he received a sweetheart deal in which he didn't even have to stay in prison. He was able to leave prison to go to work, allegedly. And when he was confronted about this, right, Alex Acosta, who was the prosecutor in this case, when he was confronted about that, he basically said, well, you know, I was told to back off Epstein because he belonged to intelligence, essentially providing some evidence, I guess, or some detail to the conspiracy theory that's playing out right now. Now, look, we're going to go to Trump's response to all of the backlash, especially coming from MAGA in regard to the administration's unwillingness to release the documents and the information that Trump campaigned on. Before we get to Trump's response, though, what do you ladies think? I mean, do you think that there is a big cover-up here? Do you think that there's actually evidence to support the fact or the idea that Epstein was working for Mossad?
I'm really disturbed by Trump's response. His response to reporters, essentially, you're still on this? Like,
Can we watch it, actually, so people know what you're talking about? Because I agree with you. The response was kind of ridiculous. Let's watch.
Your memo and release yesterday on Jeffrey Epstein, it left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for an American or foreign intelligence agency. The former labor secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Costa, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the native set?
Yeah, sure. If
Hey, could I just interrupt for 1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time?
It makes my blood boil. Yeah. Like, I mean, obviously something changed, because how could they say so brazenly and with so much confidence that information is coming? So what I want to understand between what Dan Bongino was saying, Kash Patel, what Trump campaigned on, what changed?
On it.
It was a mandate. It was a mandate from the American people.
Clinton was going to have trouble because he was associated with the secret island. There's a video of that in 2015.
So what changed? Like, that's what I'm thinking. And the only thing, and we talked about this before, and you're like, no, you're like, girl, you're being too overly optimistic. All I can hope and pray is that there's something that we don't understand with this. Maybe he's using this information against the deep state.
No way.
No way.
I'm not.
Listen, guys. I honestly, I don't know how else to interpret it without feeling so utterly blackpilled and disappointed by this administration. I'm literally, I feel sick to my stomach that he's trying to memory hold this the same freaking day that it comes out. And all of the traumatic things that we collectively experience between trauma, Russia, all these things, memory hold. They're trying to do this to us the exact same day it's released. It makes me sick. Like, I'm having a visceral reaction.
Yeah,
even rewatching
I
that.
couldn't agree with you more. And it's not just Democrats who are upset. MAGA is upset. He literally ran on this. And you actually bring up a really interesting theory. Could the calculus be it's better to have leverage over oligarchs and important people in society than it is to satisfy the teeming masses who are demanding a client list?
That's what it appears to be.
Wait, I want to tell you guys this story. So Benny Johnson, along with other right-wing influencers, have been dogs with a bone about this, right? They've been talking about this for years now. So Benny came on my podcast, and he was telling me let's say the history of Epstein. And I didn't fully pay attention at the time. I went back and I watched it, so follow this through with me. Ready? There's a guy named Donald Barr who works for the OSS, which is the predecessor to the modern CIA. This is during World War II. OSS becomes CIA. Now, Donald Barr ends up taking over one of the most prestigious schools in the country called the Dalton School, where he hires a completely unqualified 20-something-year-old named Jeffrey Epstein to teach math and physics, despite the fact that Epstein never even graduated college. Now, through the connections that Epstein makes at the Dalton School, he is referred by a parent to go work at Bear Stearns.
Right? Yep.
What? Okay, hold on. Okay, now, Donald Barr also introduces Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell,
Robert Maxwell's father, Giselle Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell.
Who has associations with?
Mossad.
Bingo.
Yep.
No, there's no definite link, right? Because you're trying to find it. However, he was literally given a state funeral in Israel and eulogized by the president of Israel. And there are other potential rumors that there's like KGB with M16. Okay, now, this gets even grosser. Nat, I just sent you a Wikipedia link. Donald Barr wrote a book called Space Relations, and it is the grossest, most creepy book, and it has to do with the galaxies. It's a sci-fi book. The super rich in the galaxy, and they're trafficking young human beings.
Oh my God.
And they talk about, even in this, it's like, then they ruined this virginal 15-year-old redhead by raping her when she was about to be traded to the elite of the galaxy. The man wrote a book about sex trading human children to the galaxy's super rich. And then, last but not least, guess who is heading the Justice Department? You know this. Take it.
Bill Barr?
Bill Barr!
Bill Barr is the son of Donald Barr. Yeah, no, there's a lot of creepy.
It's bananas.
And
There's
it
so much
doesn't
creepy
even
stuff
end there.
going on.
Who visited Jeffrey Epstein the day before he died in prison?
Was it
Bill
Bill?
Barr. He was the last
Shut
person
up.
to visit. I kid you not.
He totally killed himself.
Evidently.
Yeah.
But to Anna's point, I think it
crazy,
could
you guys.
be, he may not have been murdered, but he was allowed to kill himself. Do you understand? Like, maybe he died by his own hand, but he was allowed to do that. He was allowed to do that by the defunct cameras, by the extremely incompetent prison guards.
That's another thing. The video that they released. I mean, it's crazy because I feel like, you have Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, what they released, including a video that supposedly shows, like, no one can enter Jeffrey Epstein's cell. It was impossible for him to have been murdered. That video had a minute missing. It wasn't even Jeffrey Epstein's cell.
Right, it wasn't even outside the cell.
And it's like, first of all, you guys are real sloppy in your cover-up.
Oh my
What are
gosh.
you doing? Also, let's go back to Alex Acosta, who, by the way, in Trump's first term served as labor secretary for a brief period of time, and then he was out. But nonetheless, he was the prosecutor in the Jeffrey Epstein case. And according to ABC News, let's pull this up, Nat. It says Acosta's email inbox had a data gap covering several months. In conducting its review, the OPR indicated that it had access to more than 850,000 emails of the 5 prosecutors who were the subject of the review, as well as 6 additional witnesses. But in an appendix to the report, they revealed that there was an 11-month gap in Acosta's incoming emails that coincided with the time frame of the Epstein investigation and negotiations over the deal. After investigating the circumstances of the missing emails, which did not affect Acosta's sent mail, the OPR determined it was most likely a technological error that caused those convenient emails to disappear suddenly. No, this is a cover-up. It is. It's a cover-up. There are, in my opinion, okay, obviously we don't have the documents to prove it because the Trump administration is suppressing it from the American people. But it is my belief that there was a blackmail operation taking place. The blackmail operation specifically targeted elite politicians, but potentially judges, people in positions of power.
Yes.
And look, there are things that the United States government does on behalf of Israel that they would never, ever do on behalf of any other ally, ever, ever. And so the question is it just plain old corruption? Is it just legalized bribery in the form of like AIPAC lobbying for a foreign government? I think that plays a role for sure. But I think there's even more involved in this, right? The question is, why is Trump part of the cover-up?
I don't know if he's part of the cover-up or if it's like, this is intelligence. There's a whole operation you're about to blow.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up, sit down. And I mean, guys, though, it's also, what happened with the drones over New Jersey? Like, it's all a nothing burger. All of these things, we're like, oh, we're finally gonna know. I don't know, did you run on it to get elected?
This one goes so much deeper than that, though, because this is decades, and this is so many victims, and not only the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. What really breaks my heart about this is that, like, sexual crimes are the hardest to get convictions on. 1/4 of the civil suits that were brought against Diddy's victims were all from minors. We're going to talk about the grooming gangs in a couple of weeks. Thousands of young girls who were abused. There's never any accountability for this stuff. And I think America really, genuinely believed, I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, we really believed that there would be justice this time, and it would be bigger than just the Epstein victims. It would be all of the people who've never had justice, who were waiting for someone to say, we actually care enough to do something about this. And my heart just breaks for those people, man.
Go ahead, Lindy.
Amy, you've been amazing on this, like on and off camera. Can I just say that Amy has been consistently so strong on this issue? And I love you for it. I love you for many reasons, but thank you.
Love you.
I also want to explore something that Anna said about Alex Acosta. Can we also place this in the bigger context of Florida? Who is active in Florida at the exact same time? Pam Bondi. She is culpable.
Lindy.
I mean, she obviously, I don't know what the heck happened, because what she was saying on Jesse Waters is night and day to what happened. She said she had a client list of 1,000 people.
They all said this,
What
though, right? Like
happened?
Musk said there was a list. Bongino was like, Cash Patel's, we're going to get to the bottom. Like, Trump, as we mentioned, campaigned on it starting as early as 2015. But I think, like, I look at you and my heart breaks, because this is what happens when you get old. You just callous over and you're like, of course they didn't release this list.
I know. I'm right there with you.
I feel so ignorant.
Don't feel ignorant.
I really believed that something would happen.
No.
I really believe
No.
it. And that's why in my head, that's why I open with my statement. I'm holding on to something, like maybe Trump knows something
You
we
hold
don't.
their
Maybe
feet
he's
to the fire. That's what you do. You do
Yeah,
segments
yeah.
like this. You call bullshit. You don't accept no for an answer.
But will it change anything? Is anything ever going to change?
I have never seen Patrick Bet-David, PBD, upset at Trump the way that I saw him last night on Jesse Waters. He said this is an absolute failure on messaging, on substance. They should not have done this way. They should have gotten together in a room and, created a cohesive message, because they let down the American people.
Well, to be fair, you're actually bringing up an important point here.
Yeah,
because
final thoughts on this one, team, before we move on.
Honestly, Trump has broken a lot of promises to his base. He has. This isn't the first time. And you'll have some in the base who speak out, they'll push back. There will be a little bit of backlash, but never to this extent. And I want to give those folks a lot of credit, and I hope they continue to hold his feet to the fire, because they were given a very specific promise. The individuals engaged in the backlash right now obviously care deeply about the issue. And look, Amy, to your point about being blackpilled, I think, at least I know Jillian and I, we've been there already, right?
And I'm like, that's so sweet that you actually thought
so
that.
early in my political career, guys. Okay,
Final thing, just as a human, I want to reclaim some of your optimism.
But the final thing I'll say is, like, the black pill is really when you wake up and realize we have a duopoly in this country, a two-party system, but really it's a uniparty, right? And I believe that there are people from the Democratic Party and the Republican Party on that client list. I have no doubt, which is why you have two parties that are essentially protecting this disgusting blackmail operation that we believe this to be,
Didn't we also, I'm sorry, I probably know I promised last thoughts, but don't we already have names? Prince Andrew, Bill Gates. Like,
well,
don't we already
the girl
Clinton on the plane a bunch of times?
What did you guys think of
that
Elon
died?
calling-
that died. Yeah, the girl who accused Prince Andrew.
Virginia. And by the way, she got hit by a bus.
And let's not forget the tweet that she sent out a year ago. She said, I'm not suicidal. I'm not suicidal. If they say that I'm suicidal, it's not true. And then
there are lives lost over this. There are lives destroyed
absolutely.
over this, and the fact that there's no accountability, it really makes me sick.
We just keep talking. We keep exploring. We keep investigating, and we're going to move on from this one for now. So, next up, we're going to talk about the hideous politicization of the catastrophic flood that swept through Texas over July 4th weekend. I think, what is the number now? Killing over 160 people? Is that the...
161 are currently missing, but over 100 have already been confirmed dead.
Oh, my God.
And dozens of children.
Dozens of kids, right. So as the rescue efforts continue to unfold, several liberal figures began race baiting. So you've got Sadie Perkins, who is, I guess, a former Houston mayoral appointee, went viral for calling Camp Mystic a whites-only camp, insinuating that it only received media focus because all the girls were white. So take a look at this.
I know I'm probably going to get canceled for this, but Camp Mystic is a whites-only girls Christian camp. It is a all-white, white-only, conservative Christian camp. If you should be most likely Hispanic. If this were a group of Hispanic girls out there, this would not be getting this type of coverage that they're getting.
Okay, that's good, Nat. And then it wasn't just politicians, though. You had a really prominent pediatrician named Christina Probst who similarly spewed hate, saying the victims got what they voted for.
Jeez.
And she wished for the safety of only non-MAGA voters and pets. So this is beyond gross and awful.
She just got fired.
Lindy, I want to ask you, Why is race baiting such a powerful political tool? Why is it a go-to for the left? If it is for the right, Anna, by all means, come in and bash me, but I see it on the left constantly.
Absolutely. I also just want to bring us back for a second. This should have been a moment of national unity.
Right.
And everyone coming together and funneling all of our resources into finding these girls and their families. And by the way, it wasn't just Camp Mystic. There were a bunch of families camping along that river. So it was bigger than that. And instead, it's devolved into this exchange of race baiting and throwing hate at each other. And by the way, I want to say this Sadie Perkins woman, she doubled down. Yesterday,
God, how?
Yesterday, Nat, I put it in the clip, put it in the doc. She called these girls little, I can't even say it.
See you next Tuesdays.
Exactly.
I can't believe she said that.
I cannot
The little
believe
girls
children?
who are dead,
The
she
dead
called them
girls.
see you next Tuesday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She said this on her TikTok account in response to someone saying, how could you be so cruel? And in response to this, I am happy to say that her church issued a statement distancing themselves from her extremely gross statements. Not only that, her husband issued a statement distancing himself from his wife. Yeah.
Wow.
And unfortunately, yes.
Right?
Yeah,
How about a
unfortunately,
divorce?
though,
Grounds for divorce.
I do want to say, though, he did mince his words. He didn't condemn what she said. He disavowed he basically said this is not appropriate, but he did not directly condemn the content of her statement, which I think he definitely should have done. So, as Jillian pointed out, it wasn't just two isolated incidents. There's been a massive outpouring of Democrats and various politicos using this opportunity to race bait. And I think a part of it is just because it's clickbait. It gets, it's enraged to engage. They're trying to use this opportunity to elevate themselves. It's extremely unfortunate.
I know Amy was mentioning that, Destiny said something particularly horrific.
I would love to get into that.
Yeah.
I know we're focusing on the race baiting aspect, but once we're done with that and everyone gives their piece, I would love to come back and talk about that because I have a particular high level of vitriol for this human.
Just to say one last thing about the race thing, and please hold on to the Destiny thing because it's really important. I just want to say, I'm trying to be very fair on this, and we've talked about this, but I really think this is
you're right. It's a lefty thing. Lindy and I have gone. I'm like, I need you to take off this lens of damage. But that's why I said it. I really only see it on the left, and I opened myself up to the hammer over here.
I just want to say, I completely hear you,
it.
and I appreciate your feedback, and I'm trying here, but I do think this is an ugly manifestation of critical race theory and viewing everything through race when this is really about dead girls, families losing everything. Okay, this is about humanity. And frankly, if you look at the demographics, it's not even true. They have plenty of Hispanic girls. It's not even true. Like empirically, it's not even true. So her statement is false, by the way. So this should have been a moment of coming together. Unfortunately, it turned into something that completely ugly.
I think, look, I don't really want to get into a partisan debate because I think what she said is so horrific, and to immediately go to narratives of division and hatred when such a terrible tragedy has happened, I just find it gross. I think that race politics manifests on both sides of the political aisle, but differently. Give me
an idea how it is on the right. I want to see it. I'm asking you honestly. I don't see it.
I will give you examples.
You mean like alt-right stuff?
I mean, look, when the election was happening and the Trump campaign was claiming that Haitians were eating cats and dogs. So it manifests in different ways. But I want to focus at the topic at hand right now, which is what happened with this tragic, flood and all the, people who are missing, all the people who are dying. This country is tearing itself apart, and I think it's a really big problem. This is bigger than this one tragic event. I think that the elite in this country have done an excellent job in convincing ordinary American people that we need to fight each other, that we should not have a shared identity as Americans.
That's what this
does. And rather than holding the people up top who screw us over day in and day out, but rather than hold them accountable, we're fighting with each other. What this woman said disgusts me to no end. Because why did your mind immediately go there? Why did your mind immediately go to, wait, what is the race of the victims? Oh, they're white. Okay, I care less because they happen to be white. To call them see you next Tuesdays, they're literally children. So look, I get into a lot of trouble with the left when I make this argument. But I'm sorry, I feel that race relations in this country were getting to a better place. We weren't there yet, but getting to a better place back in the 90s when there was this goal of colorblindness. And colorblindness doesn't mean that you don't recognize or acknowledge different races. It means that you don't care about someone's race. You see them as your fellow American. You value them. You want equality for everybody. That was the goal that I think made the country better.
We had a bumper sticker. It was like one race human.
Yeah, like we protect
love
each
is
other.
love.
We
Same
love
thing with
each
the
other.
gays.
Now,
it was like it wasn't about these labels.
Now, like with how we deal with race politics, the first thing that you're like forced to do is what makes us different from each other? What is your race? You know, what is your story? You're different from me, rather than what actually connects us, what bonds us as Americans.
That's a really good point, and that's why.
You're going next, Ames.
That's why Democrats have an affinity group for literally every demographic under the sun except for white men, essentially. Literally, and they have an abbreviation and acronym for every group. I'm A, NHPI. You know, you're a LGBTQI+. And like they put you in these extremely distinct silos in the name of unity when it's actually extremely divisive. And and by the way, her comments didn't end there. She blamed these families for building concentration camps. I don't know how these families are even, first of all, it's in dispute whether
Is she just insane, maybe, guys?
She said that. She said that these families are
the summer
responsible
camp is a concentration
no,
camp?
she means the alligator Alcatraz here in Florida.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but
okay.
I mean, these people are in Texas and have nothing whatsoever to do with Governor DeSantis' policies. So she made that connection, which is completely just bonkers. I feel like this is one deranged woman, and she basically encapsulates the racial divide in this country.
Well, you bring a great transition.
Yeah.
Which was your Destiny thing, because it's like if it's one deranged woman.
Dude, I mean, Destiny, his track record has just been getting worse and worse, this particular person. Now, I did send you a message on Slack. We can go ahead and please pull up the very first tweet that he made, where he posted saying that the girls from, I believe it was Camp Mystic, they deserved to die because they were using NordVPN to get around the Texas porn ban. And then...
Wait, what?
Yeah. It was like just...
This is the thing with Destiny, okay? He did this after the first
Cory
Trump assassination event.
And you know
he loves attention. To your point, Lindy, you know, people like to rage bait or whatever. That's exactly what Destiny does. His entire career revolves around rage baiting and saying some of the most horrendous, disgusting inhumane things. Yeah.
He literally said of Cory Compertor that because his family is Republican, if they had been at the rally, they would have deserved to get shot. He said that of his own family.
Yeah.
Now, we can see, we'll go, the original one, please, Dad. I just want to make sure I get the exact quote right. I heard God killed these girls because they were using NordVPN, promo code DESTINY, to get around the Texas porn ban. Also trying to plug a sponsorship, which turns out he's not even sponsored by them. And so what's happening now, NordVPN, looks like they're about to sue him massively because there was an influx of thousands of posts of people saying canceling NordVPN right now. He's not even associated with them. They have direct results of damages. So this is going to be another lawsuit added to Destiny's current repertoire, where he is currently being pursued in court for sexual crimes against women, one of which are my friends. This is a absolutely despicable human being. And the fact that people are using a situation like this, like you said, mostly to get clicks, to increase their popularity. My question is, how mentally ill do you have to be to think that that will get you points with absolutely anyone?
Well, what's crazy is, I mean, he's a relatively popular streamer. So there's a market out there for his disgusting commentary. But what I find so fascinating about people on the left, like Destiny, is they spend a lot of time judging the other side of the political aisle for being immoral or doing things that they find disgusting and wrong. Well, what about your own conduct? What about your own behavior? And are you really a good representative of Democrats? Like, this is a guy who wanted, like, the Democratic Party to take him more seriously as, like, a representative, as a,
oh my God,
you know, like a almost like a delegate type situation. And it's like, no, bro. No.
And he started debating Ben Shapiro. He started debating like
I
all of
saw
these
that
big
on Lex.
figures
I started listening to him after that, and then I was like, oh, hold on.
Exactly.
Oh, no,
and then obviously after that Corey Coverture situation happened, like everyone disavowed him, including some people from the left. Thank goodness. I have always made it a point since I started my political career. I wanted to get around people who held different political opinions. That's what I love about this show. We're all kind of on different ends of the political spectrum. Right. I never want to be in an echo chamber. So I actually enjoyed a lot of my conversations with Destiny. And I don't know if he was always this deranged and I just didn't notice, or if something clicked and broke in his brain during the last election cycle.
I think so.
When he realized that, yeah, Biden wasn't going to be president, and at the same time, his wife, who he was in an open relationship with, openly promoted degeneracy in his relationship, ended up leaving him for a trans person.
I am so glad.
These two things converge simultaneously, and I think it broke something in his brain.
Amy, I'm so glad. I have really no idea who this person is. I was on Piers Morgan with him once, and that's the extent of my knowledge. I really don't want that trash in my head. And
I caught him on Lex once, entertained it for a little, and then I was like, oh, hold on, this guy's unhinged. And it was the Corey Compatore, I think that's, forgive me if I'm getting his name wrong, that I
You
saw it very clearly.
shouldn't wish death upon people, especially your fellow Americans, because they vote differently than you.
Right.
I get it. I mean, I definitely went through a phase, certainly in 2016, where I was not as deranged as Destiny is, but I had convinced myself, oh, people who voted for Trump are bad people. I don't think they're bad people. I think we live in a system where you have two parties that, quite frankly, suck. And after seeing what happened in the primary cycle of 2016, a lot of people who would have voted for the Democratic candidate were like, we don't know what to do. We're so disgusted with the Democratic Party. And they decided to cast their ballots for Trump. A lot of people who voted for Obama twice in states like Florida ended up voting for Trump. Does that mean that they're bad people? I think people are trying to make the best out of a terrible political situation that we're in. And we should, again, find ways to connect and bond with people in our country. Otherwise, if we keep tearing each other apart, if we continue devaluing people's lives based on their political ideology, we don't really have a country. We're just headed for the inevitable disaster of this country falling.
100%.
And by the way, we've come together before. This is not just some pipe dream. 9/11, we came together as a country. We did. On the whole, we did.
Well, the one thing that I want to throw out, and if you guys are okay after that, we'll move on, is you mentioned very specifically, and this was a point that I kind of wanted to make, is that we're not paying attention to the real bad stuff that goes on because we're so busy fighting with each other. And I do tend to wonder if that is another reason, beyond just influencers who are utilizing it as clickbait, if it is a tool that it's a distraction.
Oh, it's by design.
It's like, Jill, it's by design.
Like,
It is
you guys
fight amongst yourselves so you can't see all the crazy shit that's going on as we're siphoning off wealth from the middle class to the top, like, fraction of a percent. I think that we need to be
There's a term for that. There's a term. Isn't it called wagging the dog?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it goes back to what Dr. Drew was saying. Hysteria. We have become hysterical. And when we're sick, sad, and hysterical and emotional, you can't think logically and you can't recognize what's right in front of your face. And that's honestly what I feel like this government wants and what they keep saying to us. Stop believing your lying eyes.
I know.
No, believe your eyes. Believe what you're seeing and think critically, because as soon as you start to dig and just ask a couple of questions deeper, just go a little bit deeper, the whole thing starts to unravel.
That's so true. And then final thing I'll say about this story is the real issue here is the lack of warning about the floods, right? There was a warning system that the town was thinking about investing in, but they ultimately decided against it because they thought it was going to be too costly. These girls didn't have enough warning or any warning at all. They were asleep when this flood happened, and it's just absolutely devastating that all of these kids, all of these innocent people lost their lives. It was a horrific event, and if you don't feel deep empathy for those who have perished and their family members who are now suffering the burden of knowing that they've lost family members, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Jill, are we going to talk about the weather aspect of
you
it?
just transitioned us. So there's a whole separate way in which this is being politicized. So race baiting obviously not being the only thing. You've got Democrats like Chuck Schumer who are pointing fingers fast, blaming Trump's budget cuts to the National Weather Service, right? And there are also people suggesting that this is all because of climate change, which you and I have seen in California. Oh, no. I know you lost 2 homes in 6 years, but it's climate change. So take a look at this here. Will you play this for me, Nat?
The Commerce Department's acting inspector general, Schumer said, quote, I urge your office to immediately investigate whether the staffing shortfalls at NWS offices in Texas and across the country played a role in exacerbating the impact of this deadly flooding event. Those floods have killed more than 90 people in Central Texas, including dozens of children.
Okay,
since
cut it
January.
there. So hold on, I'm getting to you. Experts have previously warned, now this is fair, right, that potential cuts that Trump had made to the NWS could lead to more deaths and slower warnings and less accurate forecasts. In fact, this guy, Nim Kidd, who's chief of the Texas Division of Emergency Management, he blamed NWS, National Weather Service, for these reasons as well. But as mentioned, it's not just this flood, it's every natural disaster. And a lot of credible people are saying this is flatly not true. So take a look at what Michael Schellenberger has to say about this.
Over the past century, global flood deaths declined by more than 80%. That happened not because nations reduced rainfall, but because they have learned how to live with it. They built levees, dams, and drainage systems. They developed early warning systems and evacuated people before the water arrived. Kerr County in Texas failed to do any of those things.
There it is.
Despite its location in one of the most flood-prone regions in the United States, the county had no formal flood warning system. There were no sirens, no automated text alerts, no rapid evacuation protocol. The river rose and families had no idea it was coming.
Okay, kill it
Floods
there.
are not the only...
And subsequently, by the way, it's come out that the National Weather Service did warn everybody.
They did.
And all right, so I'll go Lindy, and then we'll make it our way around, because I know you got a lot to say here.
Right, so let's talk about the National Weather Service. There's been a lot of allegations, and people are rightfully concerned that given the DOJ cuts and the massive federal cuts, perhaps the National Weather Service was understaffed, but the truth is actually it wasn't. Like, I'm sympathetic to those concerns, but if you actually look at the facts, they were fully staffed that day.
Right.
And the alerts did come out a day before and also hours before the flood warnings. It's the local infrastructure that was actually lacking. It wasn't
Matt,
at
you
the
should
federal
have a
level.
picture, actually, of that I sent you. I think it's either under links or graphics, where you can see Schellenberger actually put up what the NWS had posted, and they were warning for at least a day, I think, in advance, saying, hey, evacuate, rain, this, that, trouble, get out, big storm. I mean, so if it's not that, and I want to talk for a second about climate change, because I know you two have a lot to say about that, but when it comes to the fires in California.
Right, yes, I have a lot to say.
This has been, okay, so this
very
has
similar
been
situation.
the narrative. Now, Anna, start.
Okay, so
I'll just be here to just have your back should you need it, fill in any gaps you may miss, which I doubt.
Let me begin by saying I'm not a climate denier, climate change denier. I acknowledge it exists. I acknowledge that, human activity has created this problem and exacerbated it. However, I feel that local leaders and politicians who have failed their towns, their cities, their counties, like to immediately scapegoat climate change so no one focuses on their failure. So let's talk about the California fires, the Los Angeles fires for a second.
You do this better than anyone.
Yes.
Better than me, which is amazing.
So Karen Bass, who's the mayor of Los Angeles, till this day will deny that she cut the firefighters' budget. That is untrue. She did cut millions of dollars from the fire department's budget. She increased the pay for the firefighters. So when it comes to operational funding, she did cut it. When it comes to providing more funds so firefighters who currently work for the department get paid a little more, she did increase that funding. But the operational budget obviously is incredibly important, especially when you're one of those Democratic politicians who talks about fires happening with more frequency, droughts being more of a problem because of climate change. So if you know that and you genuinely believe that, you would want to have a fire department that's fully funded and fully staffed, but that was not the case. The other thing I'll mention is there was an empty reservoir, in the Pacific Palisades area, which is where one of the fires happened. If you know that there are high winds coming, and those high winds will very likely bring on fires, wildfires.
Every year after year for decades.
Why did the Department of Water and Power keep that reservoir empty? And by the way, it had been empty for a year over the fact that the cover had a tear in it. Why was it empty for a year? Absolutely absurd. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, you know that the high winds are coming, that there's likelihood that there's going to be wildfires. Why did you travel out of the country, Karen Bass, at that time when you know that it might be important for you to be there in the city in case there is a fire emergency? The list goes on and on.
Yep.
So climate change is real. I am not denying it.
Yeah.
But the very politicians who love to talk about climate change oftentimes engage in like fear-mongering narratives about climate change, right?
Alarmism.
They tend to not prepare their own towns and cities, knowing that there are weather events coming that they need to be prepared for. Like, it just drives me nuts. Now, in this case, in Texas, right, they know that there is, you know,
They were in a flood zone. It was called Flood Alley.
That's exactly right.
It's known to flood.
So-
Just like California is known to have the Santa Ana winds and be prone to wildfires.
If I'm not mistaken, same with New Mexico, where the devastating floods just occurred
and
last
houses
night as well.
yeah.
It's very well known that was a high impact zone.
Can I mention one thing that you actually educated me on many years ago? The fact that in California, what's going to start the fires? Well, you've got meth heads on the street with our homelessness crisis that has only gotten worse despite losing $24 billion. But in addition, you have an outdated infrastructure.
Yes,
and I came to learn, thanks to you, I want to say 7 years ago, that I lost my house because a $10 hook that was 100 years old wasn't replaced by Pacific Gas and Electric. Why, though? Because they're one of the top contributors to Gavin Newsom's gubernatorial campaign.
That's exactly right.
And the list goes on and on and on and on here. So for me, the bigger concern is, I get it, in climate change, sure, I'm going to say it's 100% real, but knowing that, these are the things that cannot be allowed to continue.
Yeah.
And when they scapegoat climate change, people die.
Absolutely. It's a bigger problem that I am a diehard environmentalist, and I've taken a lot of heat because the right doesn't want to hear it. But it's just something, it's so deep. It's part of my life mission to ensure that everyone has clean air and clean water. And the problem with some of the people that you mentioned, Anna, is that not only are they fear-mongering and being alarmists, they're using climate change to impose and implement vast social change.
And
but that's
ESG
bigger than the environment.
ESG,
exactly.
This is
Which
like
is-
literally going to be our version eventually of a social credit score. They're starting to implement it within various different companies.
Stock markets, like right now, when people are deciding which stocks to buy, Wall Street analysts, they issue these ESG scores to see which companies do better on environmental policies. But like, for example, the Green New Deal completely turned off conservatives on climate change. Because of AOC and her constant fear-mongering, Republicans have connected in their minds climate change with essentially Marxist ideology, which is it's unfortunate because climate change is a serious issue. I'm telling you right now, it's happening. Anthropogenic climate change is real as fuck. It's not going anywhere, and we need to get serious about it.
But the reason why it's an issue, Lindy, is because the people who are purporting to be the advocates for it don't actually care about addressing the issue on local levels or implementing things. They care about pushing a narrative about ESG. They're in bed with the WEF and some of the insane, these people literally want you eating bugs, dude. Literally.
Okay, I want to comment on that because I think the reason why so many Americans are now kind of turned off by the reality of climate change and they just don't want to take it seriously is because our elected leaders tend to put the onus on individuals to change their behavior, to do something about it. In the meantime, our politicians, certainly on a local level, there are things that you can do to make your town or your city more robust against some of the impact of climate change, right?
Yes.
Make sure the reservoir is full. Make sure that the electric company is updating their equipment so that $10 hook that's super corroded, eroded, whatever you want to say, doesn't break, have power lines fall on the ground in a drought-prone area, which is going to spark a fire.
Don't veto bills for forestry management.
There's very little focus on ensuring that companies and corporations are doing their part to prevent some of or mitigate some of the impacts of climate change.
Yes, and I want to remind everyone, who was the president who created a system of national parks, guys? It was Theodore Roosevelt. And who was the person Who was the president who created the Environmental Protection Agency and the Clean Air and Clean Water Act?
Nixon.
It was Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
These are Republican presidents, mind you. This is something that all Americans can come together. Clean air and clean water are not partisan issues. We should all get behind it.
I completely
You're right.
And Roosevelt wasn't a Republican.
Theodore Roosevelt?
He wasn't a
Yeah,
Republican.
he was a Republican. Teddy Roosevelt, yeah.
He was a Republican?
I'm pretty sure he
I thought
was.
he was. Hold on.
And then he created
we
the
have a
Bull Moose
segment on
Party.
this in the American Party thing where I thought he
Franklin
started a
Delano
third
Roosevelt
party.
is a Democrat.
Hold on. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm talking about Theodore Roosevelt.
Oh, okay, sorry. I mixed up the two. My bad.
Where's
my
the
bad,
part
my bad,
where
my bad.
He
Hold
left
on.
the Republicans to become the Progressive Party.
Yes,
That was-
that's we have
but
that
he
in the
was
American
originally
Party
a-
piece.
okay,
I'm like,
sorry,
hold on.
my bad. I mixed up the two.
Jump ahead. Are we done litigating this one?
Can I just say one more thing?
You can.
What blows my mind is all the people who are coming out at Trump for the response. From what I've researched, correct me if I'm wrong, this seems to be one of the fastest FEMA responses since Harvey. And under the Biden administration, the people of Maui literally did not have sirens, had their exits blocked.
story.
We're in, literally, you saw that footage, man. They had no one who was there to help them. And in fact, when they were trying to leave, people prevented them from leaving. If we're going to put blame on presidents, then we need to have a much more serious conversation about what happened in Maui. And I believe in our next episode, we're going to get into, climate, geoengineering, all of those things. So I have a lot more to say, which I'll hold for future episodes. But I absolutely despise this hypocrisy. If you guys are going to talk about Trump in that manner, can we please address North Carolina as well? And FEMA apparently skipping over houses that had MAGA signs.
Oh my God,
in front
that
of
literally
them.
happened though. It wasn't just a conspiracy.
No,
There
it
was a
wasn't. I mean,
FEMA
there was a FEMA employee who admitted as such, and I was just like, why would you do this?
And you know her justification, because she felt MAGA was hostile.
Because of the othering that we just
Yes.
talked about. They're the others, the othering. And so
then-
you don't care. They're dehumanized. That is why that kind of race baiting,
Exactly.
to bring it all the way home, is so dangerous.
That's it, precisely right. And we haven't even mentioned the celebrities who use natural disasters as a chance for photo ops, including
God.
people like Meghan Markle, by the way, and also Oprah. Remember the Maui fundraiser that she did? This is a billionaire we're talking about, but
On
she's
the Rock, yeah.
Exactly. She's like, oh, please donate to this fundraiser so we can help people in Maui. Okay, why are you asking poor
Yeah.
people to help your fundraiser?
And there's
the
a
way,
huge scandal behind that,
Yes.
actually. It turned out, what was it? She was trying to buy up the land, or
Well,
I can't remember.
I was gonna
Rogan
comment,
covered it.
I was going to comment on just
Yeah.
the general
And then we'll move on after
insult
this
to
one.
injury that we see in
Yes.
these cities that have been just completely destroyed by these natural disasters that, again, their local leaders could have done a better job
Yes.
to mitigate the damage of. But to add insult to injury after the fact, all of these ordinary people who have lost their homes lose everything, and then you have corporate interests come in, buy up those plots of land. It's happening in Altadena, California, one of the areas that was impacted by the Los Angeles fires in January of this year. It's happened in Fort Myers, Florida, where Hurricane Ian destroyed people's homes. Ordinary people were living there, and now you have corporations buying those plots of land to build resorts and, Airbnbs.
Yeah.
It's again, insult to injury when those local politicians don't do what's necessary to protect their people and the property that they have.
And blame climate
There's a
change.
profit motive too. I'm sorry, this is one last point.
Okay.
It's because of the insurance companies. And guess who the insurance companies donate to? The very politicians that we depend on to protect us.
You're exactly right.
Our
Follow the money.
leaders are financially incentivized to take care of the insurance companies rather than the American people.
Yep. It's
All
true.
right, we're moving on from this one, and we're getting to the big, beautiful bill. So what actually ended up in this? Okay, so this ended up passing July 3rd. Where am I? I'm already on the friggin' American Party. I skipped forward. Okay, here we go. Congress passed it July 3rd. Trump promised it would be historic. Depending on where you stand, it might be, for better or for worse. The final version totals $1.2 trillion, with major implications on everything from energy policy, childcare, tariffs, border enforcement. Where do we net out here, Amy?
I mean, the border enforcement is what I think people are most excited about overall. There were many mandates that Trump ran on during this election. He wanted to fix the economy, so obviously that's where some of the tax cuts come in. He ran on fixing our issue with illegal immigration, and he has done a tremendous job of that so far. And I don't want to take that away from him, and the provisions in the bill to strengthen that are wonderful. But like I've mentioned time and time again, this is the issue when you don't have these single issue bills and you lump so much inside of them that people will say, okay, I'm okay with this purely on this ground, and they're able to just let it slip that there may be terrible long-term repercussions. And the way that I see it is we've traded some short-term tax relief for long-term solvency of this country.
Oh, 100%.
And, and that's why Democrats and Republicans alike have been opposed to it. We saw that it was a party line vote with J.D. Vance actually coming in to give the tiebreaker. The people who voted against it were Susan Collins, Tom Tillis, and Rand Paul. Now, I do have a video of some of the Republicans speaking out about it. Now, some of these people actually did end up voting for it, but I just want to show you some of the concerns that they had voiced prior to this being passed.
What the Senate did is unconscionable. What they did to our bill was unconscionable. I'll vote against it here, and I'll vote against it on the floor.
You're going to hear a lot about the tax cuts, but the deficit, nobody's talking about the deficit. Nobody. I got it. The tax cuts are important. We are going to get the tax cuts done in some fashion. But we cannot saddle our children and our grandchildren with an exploding national debt.
Do I like this bill? No.
Right.
I tried to
That's what I mean. They ended up voting. And so did
Alaska's
Lisa.
interests.
She ended up voting
But
for
I
it too.
know.
Although,
Give me
Oh my God, don't even get me
things, though,
started
that
on
really
Lisa.
bother you guys, because I've watched a host of different people, like Charlie Kirk, and it's like, okay, there's no tax on tips, there's no tax on overtime for cops. There, we're putting $1,000 in every baby born now into the S&P 100, so when they're 18, they got a savings account. Like, what do you
So here's the issue.
I
They
wanna really get
analyzed
it.
this over a period of a decade. And so the issue is that a lot of the tax relief and these things that are going to cost a lot more money are happening in the short term, reinstating the 2017 tax cuts, the child credits, etc.
Increases, it would be catastrophic, though.
But but they're saying over a 10-year period, it's going to be deficit neutral because the cuts that are going to come in are going to counterbalance it in the long term, such as the cuts to Medicaid, many of which don't even start taking effect until like 2026 and even
to
beyond.
Medicaid are work requirements, right?
Yes, and that's all it is, work requirements. Now, there was a point being made where they wanted to remove all illegal immigrants off Medicaid. Now, technically, they don't qualify, but there are state programs which
There
then
are.
allocate
In California,
other blue
Didn't
states.
they just end that like last week?
Newsom literally just ended it, but look, it added a pretty significant financial strain on the state. We had to borrow a lot of money because undocumented individuals, of which, by the way, there are many in California, were qualified to receive Medicaid, which I think there is a good argument for that in regard to how expensive it is when someone just ends up in an emergency room. Like, preventative care actually keeps costs down. However, you got to kind of take a look at this bill, like the whole bill on its own. Trump made the same argument in 2017. Oh, these tax cuts, which disproportionately do benefit the richest people in the country, the best, like the most profitable corporations, they're going to create jobs, and it's going to create so much economic opportunity, it'll pay for itself. But that is not what happened. There has also been analysis done to see if these corporations who got a fat tax break actually created more jobs. They didn't. A lot of them engaged in mergers and acquisitions and got rid of a bunch of jobs.
Right.
And then with this bill, look, I'm just going to keep it 100.
I still don't see what you guys hate so much.
Okay, so like
let me say one sentence.
No,
okay,
please.
What
I'm
hate-
seriously asking. Like,
we're
what do
spending
we really hate?
We're spending $1 trillion already a year to service our debt. This adds to our debt. Every
But through
analysis.
the tax cuts, you're saying.
The tax cuts and the spending, because it allocates more money for defense, by the way. I think it was $150 billion in additional spending on defense.
Okay.
Additional spending on the border, right?
But
So
if
there's
we
a lot more
close the
spending
border, that will
and less
save us,
revenue.
no?
And less cuts.
But less
Here's
revenue
the cuts. Here's the
because
thing.
of the cuts in taxes.
And the cuts, how can they bind a future Congress to these cuts? There is
can't.
no way for them to bind them. So in another
But guys, the
4 years when
alternative-
Trump is out of office, we're just going to keep kicking this can down
Not
the road.
only that-
And then our children and our children's children and our children's children's children
That's exactly
are going
right.
to
And you
have
know
to
what?
deal with it.
They're already talking about a mega bill in the fall. They're doing another one. This is a disaster from a financial point of view.
It sure is.
I'm trying to give Trump. Hold on, let me.
many
I just
conservatives. Because when I hear
because
this
they're
argument of
kissing
like
the ring.
work requirements
That's unfortunately
for Medicaid, Yes.
I'm a huge proponent of fiscal responsibility. This is devastating for our national debt. This is an additional $3.4 trillion on top of $33 trillion of our debt. And you and I, we are paying for that, my friends.
More than defense at this point. Defense spending is like about it's going to be $1 trillion
Let me tell you
soon,
why
but
this impacts the everyday American. It's not just about national debt. Everyone's interest rates go up.
Yep.
If the federal government's interest rates go up, and what does that mean? You pay more for your house, you pay more for your car, and don't even get me started on what we had to do to get Lisa Murkowski on board.
Right.
We had to bribe her with $1 billion for random shit in Alaska to get her vote. She didn't want to come on board, so we were just throwing random stuff like at her, for fishers, for fish, like things that you have no idea. These esoteric, uniquely Alaska, this basically pork.
It's pork
to bribe her to get her to vote. It just completely. And I do have to diverge with Anne a little bit on here. I hate to do that, but I really feel like work requirements are a good thing, and it's something that
too. Like I'm waiting to see, and I hear everything you're
saying.
saying.
Hold on, can I just say they cut $1.1 trillion from Medicaid. They cut up. So the Medicaid system is robbed of $1 trillion. The work requirement argument is total bullshit. It's not about work requirements.
Explain it to me.
They're getting less funding. So it doesn't matter if you work or not, even if you qualify. If there isn't enough funding for you to, get Medicaid and you're like living in poverty, you're not going to get Medicaid. They don't have an additional 1.1 trillion
than just work requirements.
They're worried about rural hospitals shutting down.
Okay, that is a completely different. So that is a piece that I have yet to hear. I've heard work requirements, work requirements, work requirements.
Let's talk
this
about
thing
the
is so big, it's almost impossible to follow. I'm like, wait, we're doing AI regulation? No, we're not doing. We're funding abortion. We're not funding abortion.
We are.
There's tax cuts.
So,
there's not. It is almost impossible.
Wait, couple of white pills because I have been super negative on this segment. I like that they stripped Mike Lee's national parks provision. They're not going to sell off the national
Right.
parks.
Yes, that's right.
That is a good thing.
That's because of the parliamentarian, by the way.
Yeah. I do like that they have defunded Planned Parenthood. That is only for 1 year, though. I was hoping that we'd see a lot more defunding because, as we've covered on previous segments, they are not being responsible in the way they are distributing care. They are transing minors without doctor's notes, without any oversight.
Right.
I do understand that they serve a purpose, but I think they're grossly misappropriating what their bounds are.
But on one hand, we got, and I hear you, and I'm sorry, but on one hand, it's like, we're adding all this money. We cut Medicare. We cut Medicaid. It's like, but
can
you have it all? That's kind of the part where it's like, we're adding all this money to the bottom line and the deficit and but they cut this and they cut that. So is it the allocation?
It's the whole thing. It adds to the debt. I have a huge problem with the fact that we're nickel and diming the American people on things like health care, which people desperatly need.
So you want that money to health care, not defense.
By the way, there's no debate at all about we're just going to add an additional $150 billion in defense spending, something that we already spend close to $1 trillion a year on anyway.
Well, politicians get paid to do that because
of the defense contractors and everything.
That's very that. I'm like, I hear you. I understand.
So this is the way I see it.
These
it
concrete
takes
things
from the
people.
poor to give to the rich. That's the best way to frame this bill. That's what it does. By the way, let me just put all my cards out on the table. I'm going to get a tax cut. A nice, sweet tax break.
Everyone's
because of
happy
this bill.
about that.
So I should celebrate, right? Except, no, I don't want to celebrate because me getting a little bit of extra money in my pocket isn't going to benefit my life as much as it would to see my fellow Americans get the health care they need to live healthy lives. Okay?
Right.
And there's no debate about us just paying for bombs for other countries, sending more weapons to foreign countries for their wars that American taxpayers fund, but we're going to nickel and dime the American people on health care?
Unfortunately,
your point though,
ladies,
these are the points that are not honestly coming across in a way that's clear, with people really leaning into, I like this thing that we're giving babies. I'm like, well, that's cool. I like work requirements. Okay, yeah. I don't want to fund her abortion. Okay. But I really, honest to God, don't feel like someone has said exactly, I don't like that we're giving all this money to defense instead of healthcare.
Well,
because it's like, you see what I'm saying?
It's just the balancing of the budget and the timeline of it, right? Because again, all of the relief and the benefits are in the short term.
Yeah.
And anybody knows when you're setting any worthwhile goal, even on a smaller scale, let alone running a freaking nation, the most powerful nation in the world, shouldn't you have a little bit of foresight to how this is going to affect future
Well,
generations. It is good for us right now. So let me ask you a question. What do you think would be better, us to get the short-term tax relief now, or deal with this can that we're kicking down the road?
Well, guys, this is wait, hold on, guys.
Hold on. Sorry, my bad.
Thank you. Well, a lot has happened since I last. So, to Anna's point, I actually agree with you 100% on this because we are the United States of Lockheed Martin.
I know.
That's what it is.
I do know that. This is, you got me on this one.
Yeah,
I'm with
and
you
unfortunately, the military-industrial complex, 70 years later, after Dwight D. Eisenhower's warning, we are still falling prey to its siren call, unfortunately. So that's number one. And by the way, Amy, I loved your point about how in the immediate term, the short-term stuff, it's all good, but the long-term stuff is bad. And it's perfectly timed. It wasn't a coincidence. And the reason why is they want to get through the midterms, and Republicans want to retain
That's what I'm
control
saying.
of the
There's
House.
no way they will survive that if you do not do the tax cuts.
Well,
so it's like you're asking for an ideal world.
Yeah, but they're looking at it
that the
over a
voters will
10-year
forget.
period, and that's what they did last time as well, where they look at it over a 10-year period because that's how the grading system works. It comes out deficit neutral. But the only thing that is guaranteed right now is we're going to increase spending.
Right.
Nothing is guaranteed on these cuts because we cannot bind a future Congress to those. So it sounds good. It is simply optics.
We are on a
That's all
very
it is.
dangerous trajectory. And I do want to say, on this, I have to diverge from you a little bit. I just have to be, stay true. But like, instead of freaking out about the work requirements, can we get specific about what they are? Because we haven't. Let's enumerate. It's 80 hours a month, and you don't have. It's
I know.
able-bodied
But by the way,
individuals,
I know you're not
able-bodied-
understanding my point, though. You're not understanding my point. It's one thing to be like, we're going to implement work requirements. By the way, we've done this before. It's failed, but whatever. We're going to do it again. It's going to fail again. Let's just go through the process. But it's not that. I just think the work requirement argument is total BS because they've preemptively cut $1.1 trillion to the Medicaid system. That means the Medicaid system already is robbed of $1.1 trillion in funding. So even if everyone who's currently getting Medicaid actually qualifies for Medicaid under the work requirement, well, what happens if the system has been robbed of $1.1 trillion?
Well, this is like dozens of billions of dollars that we've trillions of dollars that we've dedicated in Medicaid. But I do want to say it's kind of, from my point of view, it's an insult to the American people to think that they can't fill out a form twice a year.
It's an insult to the American people when we're funding fucking bombs for Israel or for Ukraine, but we can't afford fucking health care for the poor in our own country.
I don't think that we should be paying
I hate this argument. It's
I don't
pathetic.
think we should be paying for illegal immigrants. I just don't think.
No, but what are our priorities? What are our priorities? But keeping Americans healthy, even if they're living in poverty, or sending bombs to foreign countries?
You make a great point there. However, I think with regard to the work requirements, it's a question of.
It's total bullshit.
I hear you, but the bigger thing for someone like myself is, hey guys, we got to take agency here.
Okay,
exactly.
So and it's beyond just relying on the dole.
Yes,
in other words,
amen.
Do we have data? Like, does anyone on this panel who's like, we need to have work requirements? We need to have work requirements.
I'm not
It's so
saying
important.
work requirements.
Do you guys have data showing that there's a bunch of bums in America who like refuse to work?
There's
okay, what is it? Tell me what the data is.
Wait, let me first just take a broader step. It's a good thing to give people dignity. It's
What's the data? Because I've looked at the data. What's the data?
You're suggesting they won't do the work?
You're saying that every single
everyone who's in favor of the work requirements has this assumption that able-bodied Americans who are on Medicaid are just lazy bums.
Are
and they're
you
like
saying that
refusing to
literally
work.
every single person is entitled to Medicaid?
This has been analyzed a billion times.
Are you saying that
every
100%?
able-bodied person who's receiving Medicaid, who is not taking care of dependents and can't work because of that, they're qualified because they are already working.
You're saying
there's over 60% who are able-bodied and they
it
are
up?
working.
Is
Yes,
it
we can look it up
possible
right
to
now.
Somebody look it up. Please.
So wait, but
Matt, can you
explain
look
this
it
to me.
up?
If I'm able-bodied, why am I not working? Then you're saying there's no jobs for them?
My point is, able-bodied people who are getting Medicaid are working. They're all working
unless they have a
now-
dependent.
Unless they're taking care of elderly family
But then they
members.
qualify, though.
Yes, that's the point. Okay, everyone, focus. Yes, they qualify. So the argument is they're working, so they qualify. So what's the big deal? They robbed Medicaid of $1.1 trillion. The whole system has a lot less money to function.
First of all, guys, there are
hold on. Are we arguing
immigrants
work
on-
requirements though? Because you're saying they're working.
Overall,
I feel like
over
we're
time-
conflating different issues. All right. Does it? Do we need to continue litigating this? You guys all hate this. I'm giving it a little more time to play out.
I just want to say that we are talking about, like, we're on many different tracks right now.
Right.
Can we all agree that it's not a good idea to have illegal immigrants on Medicaid? Can we just, is that something that we can establish rapport on?
I know your argument, because I've seen Gavin Newsom make that case in debates. But my thing would be, how about no illegal immigration then? I would go kind of back to reform immigration.
And you know what? We have had this conversation before, Anna, where we talk about like socialized programs that are available to people. And the reason why in Nordic countries it's not such a drain on the system is because they don't funnel it through to illegal immigrants.
Immigration.
Exactly.
Yes,
and if we had a similar functioning system, then I think that program would be so much more effective. So
that's fair. That's fair. And you're right. You know, Scandinavian countries, and I've looked into this personally, have incredibly strict immigration policies, far more strict than the United States, if you can believe it. And it's because they have a robust, you know, social safety net, public programs that people pay into, and they don't want it to be unfair where people come in illegally and they take advantage of those programs. But again, I just want to go back to the point that it does, even if let's just put, this is the hypothetical. Every single person who's currently getting Medicaid right now would still qualify after this bill passes. They would all qualify. They're all doing the work, whatever.
Regardless, there's money gone to bombs.
But hold on, forget about the bombs.
Okay.
Everyone who's currently getting Medicaid would qualify even after the passage of this bill.
Got it.
What happens to them when the system has been cut to the tune of $1.1 billion?
That's a very generous assumption, though, that everyone would qualify. Like, I find that hard to believe.
There is analysis on this. There's data on this.
For example, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, even said that there are a ton of able-bodied people.
Okay,
who
so we're okay with people not getting Medicaid because we've made an assumption.
I believe
we've made an assumption that they're all lazy bums who refuse to work.
I believe in American people, and we should. Why are we in this welfare mentality? What happened to personal responsibility and just
because we live in a country where we have fewer jobs, and more importantly, fewer and fewer well-paying
open jobs. Though.
Hold on. Fewer and fewer well-paying full-time jobs with benefits. More and more people are relying on a bunch of temporary jobs, like they cobble it together, or a bunch of part-time jobs that they cobble together. It's funny because we have all of these different thoughts that conflict with one another, and we never connect the dots. So for instance, on one hand, we talk about AI and how it's going to rob people of their jobs, and that's already happening. In fact, the very industry, Silicon Valley, is impacted the most at the moment as a result of AI. A bunch of people losing their jobs. Okay, fine. Bunch of jobs have been offshored to foreign countries because, corporations want to exploit cheap labor rather than pay American workers a living wage.
Yes.
All of this stuff is happening at the same time in our economy, and yet we're just going to chalk Medicaid recipients up to lazy bums who refuse to work.
But Anna, there's 7.8 million unfilled job openings.
What kind
in
of
the
jobs
US.
are those, though?
Okay, let's say.
When you break it down, they're mostly part-time jobs or temporary construction jobs.
Part-time job.
I know, but I want you to look up the
and
data.
by the way, it's not even just work.
I want you to look up the data in regard to how many current Medicaid recipients are working. How many
aren't
working?
Lose their benefits,
and I believe that it's also like
they cut the money.
I'm gonna lose my mind. If they cut $1 trillion from the system, they're fucked. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I get it, but then
oh
my God, do you actually have an issue with job requirements?
You know what? Fuck it. Just let them fucking die. Who cares, right?
Hold on. You're assuming that the entire program is $1 trillion.
Who cares?
Medicaid is a multi-trillion-dollar program. $1 trillion isn't going to decimate the program. That's a false.
All right, we'll see what happens.
And again, I just want to
really
say that I have strong faith in the American people that they don't constantly have to rely on welfare to have a meaningful life. Like, when did we get into this very toxic mentality that we had to depend on the government?
Lindy,
for
you live in a bubble. You don't know what it's like
Growing
to live
up
in poverty.
You don't have any financial literacy.
What it's like. You're sitting here on a set, feeling real good about yourself, looking down your nose at people who need Medicaid. It's ridiculous.
I grew up in poverty.
All right, let's do this.
I grew up in tenement housing.
I feel like I'm speaking to a wall. Let's just move on.
Let's just move on. We're not.
I just want to apologize to all the Americans who are going to suffer as a result of this bill.
Right, but
and the added defamatory conversation about them being lazy bums on top of it. But anyway,
no one is saying that.
Bums.
We're trying to get
people saying there's 8 million jobs.
Exactly.
If you're able-bodied, let's fill them.
And by the way, the work requirement isn't just work. They can go to school.
Why are
they
we
can
assuming they're not
volunteer.
working? There is
Because
a
so many of them,
okay, so
there's
hold
no
on.
work
Stop,
requirement
stop.
right
okay,
now.
but then my point is,
Oh my
if they're
God.
working, then this job requirement's irrelevant.
Okay, but if the
Exactly.
system doesn't
And then
have enough money to provide
Then
them the
that
health
is a
care,
different point, though. That's why I'm saying I feel like you're conflating two different issues. You're either
No,
pissed that
she's
they
not.
have to
Okay,
work.
okay, no.
I'm gonna
What
lose
she's
my mind.
saying is that much has been removed altogether,
Period.
irregardless of
It's a
who is going to be
multi-trillion
caught.
dollar
So even if all of those
Separate
people,
issue, you are conflating two
but we're saying that
issues.
even if none of those people,
I know,
get
Amy.
Yeah,
caught,
can
but
you
are
find out how many $1 trillion is
One thought.
Medicaid?
You're either pissed that there's work requirements, right? Or you're saying they are working and they're losing the money. Those are two separate issues.
What?
Here we go. Speaking of, okay, you guys are not the only people that are extremely unhappy about the passing of the big beautiful bill, because a few days later, on July 5th, Elon Musk announced that he is forming a third party, the American Party. He did a poll on X, and apparently nearly 65% of 1.2 million users said that they want a third-party alternative to the GOP and the Democrats. Musk says it's going to be fiscally conservative, centrist, reform-focused. Its intentions are to challenge the entrenched two-party uniparty, which Musk described as bankrupting the country with waste and graft. Now, its early platform focuses on reducing debt, modernizing the military with AI, cutting regulations, boosting birth rates, and even potentially exploring Bitcoin adoption. All right, so what do we think this means for the political landscape?
Right. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how our system is basically governed by a duopoly at the top. You know, a uniparty. A lot of Republican and Democratic oligarchs have a lot more in common than with each other than they do with the American people. And well, first of all, I do want to challenge the premise of the X poll that drove the creation of the America Party. This is 1.2 million votes, but there was no way, there was no sort of transparency. We don't even know if the people who participated in the poll are American citizens. They could have been international.
and I feel like a lot of X users mostly skew right wing. Like,
Exactly.
I don't think that it's
especially,
a 50-50 on X.
I mean, they're notoriously unscientific and unreliable, so I don't think we should base the creation of a massive party based on X poll. But I do think the underlying drivers of this party are really legitimate. I'm upset, as we already discussed, and Anna, you agree with me on this, that the Big Beautiful Bill was a big blow up of our national debt. It added $3.4 trillion, and I think Elon was rightfully concerned. He gave up his, he basically essentially destroyed the market value of Tesla. It's been plunging. He did that all for Doge. And what did he get in return? Essentially nothing. He worked so hard to, whittle down our national debt, and it was blown up and completely undermined by the passage of this bill. So I completely understand his frustrations.
Yes.
And I was actually initially very wary of the American Party, but then I looked at his strategy, and that's to go after 8 to 10 House seats, and to go after
spoiler.
2. Exactly.
Yeah, it's not to win the White
It's
House.
not
You
a
can't win the White
spoiler.
House
He's
as
not
third party.
playing in the presidential politics, which means he's not going to be a Ross Perot in 1992, which is a complete disaster, and actually didn't really make much of an impact the way that Ross Perot wanted. So he is trying to use a scalpel approach to the situation, and he's trying to push conservatives in the direction of your favorite boy, Thomas Massie. And by the way, whom he promised, Elon promised, I thought about you, Amy, when I said this, when I read this. Elon has promised to help Thomas Massie prevail in the primary challenge that Trump is launching against
Not
him.
only that, but he promised, and Nat, I think we have this tweet, he promised to primary every single Republican member who voted for the big, beautiful bill. Because, yeah, it directly undermines all the work he did with Doge to try to root out all of the waste, fraud, and abuse. And I know we've litigated this before, and a lot of you thought, oh, it's the EV cuts. I went further back. Elon wants a true free market system. He doesn't want incentives for his EV cuts. He was fine with that.
Are you sure, girl?
Oh, well, that's what I heard him say.
He has to say that. He has to say that.
And he has at least been on
Can we pull
record
up the first
saying
graphic
that.
in the national
Maybe
debt?
that pissed him off. I think what pissed him off the most is that this initiative that he did with Doge and then the subsequent big, beautiful bill directly undermined what he did.
I have a big, beautiful graph.
Oh, let's
Can we
look at the
take a
big
look?
beautiful- Absolutely. Let's
All
look.
right, so as mentioned, I'm a huge fan of fiscal responsibility, and unfortunately, the debt has been skyrocketing under both parties. And let's talk about both Biden and Trump. It's not just Trump and his big, beautiful bill. It's Biden and his Inflation Reduction Act, which is extremely egregiously wrongly named, by the way. I mean, inflation skyrocketed under Biden, but we still have not gotten back to pre-COVID levels of spending. That's how egregiously and how precipitous the incline in spending has been. So I'm completely sympathetic to Elon Musk on that. And we already talked about how we pay more than $1 trillion a year just to service our interest payments. That is insane, and it's only going to get worse and worse.
Yeah.
Another thing is, I do appreciate where Elon is coming from, but I do want to mention one thing that I have a quibble with. He talks about how we should be basically remove all regulations around tech, and that's his posture. Yeah. And then that leads me to question, who are the primary beneficiaries of such a policy? And I can give you two players right now, SpaceX and Tesla, and who owns them?
And AI.
Exactly, and he obviously has also a horse in that race as well.
A bunch of his people are in Palantir as well, man. Like, come on.
Can I just say, I don't trust Elon Musk on this topic at all, and the reason why I don't is because we, the American taxpayers, made his businesses. Now, we might not be the minds behind his businesses, we certainly funded them. I'll give you an example. His businesses have received at least $38 billion in government contracts, loans, subsidies, and tax credits, and that's just past the last 2 decades, right? He's got multiple businesses. American taxpayers have been bankrolling them to some extent for a long time now. And for him to come out and pretend like he's worried about government debt is certainly rich, given the fact that he's been a beneficiary of this type of government spending.
He would be what we
could
call
it be
welfare
both,
queen.
though, guys?
Yeah.
Here's my question. Could it be both? Like, we've seen him do this with X, right? He goes in, he cuts, and this, that, the other. It's more productive, more profitable. I mean, he is an incredible businessman. And I'm sure he would want to run the government in that way. But he also, as mentioned, got snubbed with AI in the Middle East. We talked about that before in a previous show. He lost all of these EV benefits and tax subsidies in the big, beautiful bill. I'm sure that pissed him off.
Yeah.
Like, could it be a little both? I mean, he's no third party's
Yeah,
gonna work.
I think it could
We're
be
a hardwired two-party system. Not gonna work. It's
I think it could be both. I think it's both. He doesn't want government spending in other areas at all, and he'd like government spending for himself and his businesses. I think it could totally be both. I think that's what's going on here.
I think he genuinely also believes that with the GDP that will be able to be produced from his successful businesses, because he's an incredible businessman. Look at what he's done. He's dominated industry.
Completely.
He believes that maybe, we can catch up in that sense, and that's pretty much his sentiment now. He has given up on weeding out the waste, fraud, and abuse, and he said, really, the only thing that we can do about this is just make it up with GDP. But to your point, Lindy, like, I looked into it as well, and I am I'm also starting to feel it's two heads of the same pig. You brought up Biden's spending, but even before him, Trump added $8.1 trillion with his COVID-era spending. Before him, George W. Bush added $6.1 trillion.
Not to mention
and then
his
even
two
Clinton,
disastrous wars. I mean, that was the beginning of the end for me. Like,
yeah.
Iraq and Afghanistan, the two biggest stains on American history, by the way.
And to me, what's frustrating is, like, conservatism. I'm new to the political scene. I've been in America 8 years. Conservatism, to me, a big part of that is fiscal responsibility and making sure the next generation is going to be in the best possible position. And I want to be the MAGA person. I want to take the conservative side, but I don't feel like conservatives are even taking the conservative
everyone's full
side.
of shit on this.
Well, here's my question to all of you. Okay, so historically speaking, these third parties are either absorbed, like you saw with the Republicans and the Tea Party. Okay, so who is this going to hurt the most? Because generally when you've got a third party candidate, the guy you like the least ends up winning.
Yeah.
So what, really, I want predictions real quick on this one and then we'll move on. What happens?
I don't think this is going to go anywhere.
Okay.
I don't even know if it's going to hurt. If it were to hurt a side, I'm guessing it would hurt Republican candidates.
They're the ones who are freaking out, by the way.
But I honestly don't think this is going to go anywhere. I'm just keeping it 100. Okay. And to some extent, I'm sad about that, not because of the project that Elon Musk wants to partake in, but specifically because I think that part of the reason why we have a broken system is that we only have two parties and we have no other options. And every single election cycle, you're forced to choose the lesser of two evils. Well, what if I don't want to choose evil? What if I want to actually choose someone who represents my interests? And there are really no opportunities to do that. certainly on a local level, you have more opportunity to do that. But on a federal level, this like duopoly is a problem.
Like, what was the closest?
What
was even the closest margin in voting? Does anyone recall
It's
where
Ross
a third-party
Perot in
candidate?
1992.
There's a whole list of these
and that
guys.
was like
They never work.
And they wasn't even close.
Yeah, they don't work. You're right.
They don't work because it's hardwired not to work, and it would have to be completely reformed with the whole like first past the. It's a whole friggin' thing.
I mean, if we had ranked
just-
choice voting, I think ranked choice voting could potentially be
But you have to
beneficial.
reform everything.
You
though.
do, and they never
that's
will.
never going
No.
to happen. So then I'm saying, like, if we come back down to reality, you think it goes away. I think he's forcing change on both sides, and this is a leverage game.
I just hope that at least at the minimum, he backs Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie, in my opinion, is one of the only last honest people in Congress who vote with their conscience. So I hope at the very least Elon keeps his word and backs him and helps to keep him in.
That I agree with.
Okay, in terms of what's going to happen, he pledges to only play in 8 to 10 House seats and a few Senate seats, so he's not even going to be a factor on the presidential level, and that's where people pay attention the most. So I really think this is really just a tantrum against Trump. I think that's an immediate.
No, it could be a very big power play.
Exactly.
Here,
and I just want to say, just because he's worth $400 billion, yeah, okay. But remember his massive face plant in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Supreme Court race? He funneled tens of millions of dollars in that race. And what did that happen? He lost by a landslide.
Completely forgot
So at
that.
a certain point, the American people are smart too. They see past the billionaires and the oligarchs, and they're going to vote the way that they want to. Money can only go so far. Let's bear in mind what this money is primarily going to. It's going to TV ads. And people, we are cutting the cord. We're streaming on YouTube. So Americans are watching increasingly less cable TV, and which means the power of oligarchs and their corporate spending is also going to decrease in power. So who knows? I really don't think this is going to have a massive impact where it matters the most, and where it matters most is every 4 years in the presidential election. And Elon's not going to touch that.
No, but all right, well, we'll see. I disagree with you, not with regard to it touching the presidential. There's no shot of that, but I think that he will gain huge leverage with this, and I think that's his plan. But let's see. All right, I really want to get to this one, though, and I know Anna's going to want to punch me in the face. Next up, President Trump. You're not going to like my opinion on this one. That's why I want to get to it, because I just think, like, let's have some fun with this. We should talk about it. President Trump's ongoing trade agenda. So what he's calling is the 90-day push to reshape U.S. trade relations. This is extended after July 9th to August 1st. He's ramped up pressure on our international partners. He's sent out tariff letters to 14 countries. Take it away.
Yeah, so look, President Donald Trump, I believe, is learning the hard way that reaching trade deals is actually a lot more difficult, a lot more complicated than just using tactics of coercion or pressure. And as you know, he's been pressuring our trade partners to essentially come back to the table and renegotiate deals that are more favorable to the United States. So let me back up for context, because on April 2nd of this year, that was Liberation Day, as Trump dubbed it. And he said that he would implement steep reciprocal tariffs on our trade partners if they failed to sign new trade deals with the United States by July 9th. Well, July 9th comes and goes, and so there's this question about, like, what comes next. And so we get a new deadline. So he seems to be wavering on that deadline, too, though. According to the Financial Times, Trump also left the door open for negotiations, saying that the letters were more or less final offers and not 100% firm. And what letters are we talking about? Well, Scott Bessent, we're going to show you, that's the, trade secretary, and he explains the letters in a minute. But first, let's listen to Trump, and here's what he said during a recent interview with press.
If they call with a different offer, and if I like it, we'll do it.
And the August 1 deadline, I mean, is the August 1 deadline firm now? Is that it?
I would say firm. No, I would say firm, but not 100% firm. If they call up and they say, would like to do something a different way, we're going to be open to that. But essentially, that's the way it is right now, yeah.
So, look, the important takeaway there is that the August 1st deadline isn't really firm. I actually think that's a good thing, because I don't want these steep tariffs across the board to go into effect. It's going to lead to inflation in this country. But in the meantime, the Trump administration is sending out these threatening letters, pressuring our trade partners to negotiate or renegotiate. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is going to explain that. This is during an interview with CNN. Take a look.
So the countries will get a letter saying that if we have not reached an agreement, then you will go back to the April 2nd level.
Starting when? On August 1st?
On August 1st.
Okay, so there's basically a new deadline.
It's not a new deadline. We are saying this is when it's happening. If you want to speed things up, have at it. If you want to go back to the old rate, that's your choice.
When you say that there's going to be a lot happening over the next few days and you don't want to give me the playbook, is there a playbook?
Sure. The playbook is to apply maximum pressure. We saw that the EU was very slow in coming to the table 3 weeks ago on a Friday morning.
Okay, so there is a new deadline. Again, it was July 9th, and now the new deadline is August 1st. I hate the gaslighting. Just be honest. Just be honest. We want to give more time for negotiations. People respect honesty, but okay. Now let's take a look at this graphic that shows you what Trump's new tariffs will be if these specific countries fail to reach a new agreement with the United States. So as you can see, Bangladesh, any imports coming from Bangladesh would be tariffed at 35%, Cambodia 36%, Indonesia 32%, Japan 25%. Japan's one of our top trading partners, by the way. And so Japan is an interesting case because they've been less willing to play ball than I think the Trump administration expected. And considering they're such a huge trade partner of ours, you know, should a 25% tariff on Japanese imports come into effect, that will absolutely be at least partially passed down to the consumer in the U.S., and that will drive up inflation. So that's the concern right now. Trump administration says the negotiations are ongoing. I guess we're going to wait and see what happens. But I don't think Trump is going to actually implement tariffs that high, because it will make him the least popular president in American history if those costs are indeed passed down to American consumers.
So you think it's just a intimidation tactic
I
to
do.
essentially make them comply with what he wants?
To come back to the table and negotiate for better deals. Now, he's really upset with Japan because he really wants Japan to buy American rice and American cars. But Japan is like, no, we don't want to do that. So that's like a sticking point right now. To be fair, Japan has made some other concessions. So I do think Trump is going to get some, you know, some cookies from some of these negotiations.
Right.
And I want to be clear, I think that targeted tariffs, like the ones that he implemented in his first term, were actually pretty good. I mean, the tariffs on some products coming from China, for instance.
Yes.
That was smart. They were so effective. They worked out so well that the Biden administration kept them and even expanded upon them. So I do think that there's a place for targeted tariffs. I don't know if this like approach of like tariffs for everybody works.
Right.
We'll see.
Well, okay,
Well,
hold
there's
on.
a
The
deranged
jury's
man
out.
theory. He's currently governing by, you know, according to that theory, deranged man theory. Basically,
fun.
Exactly.
Hold on.
It's
Is
liberal
anybody
theory.
for this? Because I actually am.
Well, I
even
have
though
a very-
and I have a case for it.
Because you believe
I
we're
have a
doing American
nuanced-
production and
Well,
just
okay, so
focus
there's
on-
a couple of issues that are irrefutable. One being national security. We saw this during
I agree.
COVID.
I agree.
He's going after pharmaceuticals in particular with the PPE stuff.
Agree, yeah.
Another one, and not to mention, guys, when we look at what he's going after in particular right now, copper, tech stuff, like we've talked about this with Apple and iPhones. You know, are they spying on us through our vacuum cleaner? The national security with regard to, I swear to God, it's there's a whole
I believe you.
article about
I
that,
believe you, girl.
about how there were like chips in vacuum cleaners coming from China. So,
Right.
Yeah.
so you've got like a national security issue across the board with regard to supply chains for very important shit, chips, pharmaceuticals, the list goes on and on. Then you've got a reshoring element here. And I'm going to just say this, so far, in 2025 versus 2024, we've seen a 454% increase in tariff-triggered reshoring activity. GE just came out and said they're going to do a $490 million reshoring move and guarantee 800 jobs. We've seen it from Johnson & Johnson, planning $55 billion in manufacturing and investments over 4 years in North Carolina. Apple pledged $500 billion, building new manufacturing capacity and AI plants in Houston. Hyundai, $21 billion. Honda, AbbVie, Merck, NVIDIA, blah, 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 blah. The point is, I think I get the strategy piece. Do we have to do it like this? Do we have to go crazy all at the same time? But it seems like the markets are generally healthy. We're the biggest buyer in the room. I think they got to do business with us. And this kind of comes down to your big, beautiful bill argument for me. In other words, like you guys are saying, we're kicking the can, we're kicking the can. I think previous administrations have kicked the can. I think globalists like Obama hollowed out the Rust Belt of our country.
That's true.
I think it has to be done. And I'm for it. I'm for it.
Can I just say, I have a nuanced perspective on it. I'm in favor of a lot of what you said. I do want to give Trump a lot of credit for going after China because somebody needed to do it, and China has been unfair towards the United States ever since they joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. And no one had the guts to take on China the way that Trump did. So I have to give him tremendous credit for that. Another thing that I have to say, though, tariffs are paid for by Americans.
Yeah.
We're the ones paying
But guys,
for it.
inflation is a bipartisan rot, and it is a small price to pay for all the things we're talking about, and we're paying it anyway. We continue to pay it. Every single party, every single administration, inflation.
I'm talking about tariffs, so the import tax. These are taxes that Americans have to pay on their Christmas gifts. That's coming up.
But it makes you're saying it inflates the price, though, right, of your everyday things. So essentially it is inflation, though.
He's threatening to impose 135% tariffs on China goods. So can you imagine what Americans have to pay for their toys?
But I would say it's now with an end in sight that will benefit Americans. I mean, that is the plan. Does it work? I'm betting yes right now, but I could very well be wrong.
I don't think that these high tariffs will be implemented at the end of the day. In regard to the national security elements, I don't even think we should have a negotiation about it. Pharmaceutical drugs should be manufactured in the United States, period. End of story.
Because
anything
he's
pertaining
them
to
to do that, though. You're seeing
right,
that
but I mean,
now.
he wants them to come back, have a seat at the table, and negotiate like. We don't need to negotiate the national security stuff.
Yeah.
We should be manufacturing that stuff here in the U.S., whether it's the chips, whether it's the pharmaceutical drugs. I think that maybe this threatening approach could lead to better trade deals when it comes to other products that are being imported that are not, related to our national security. We just have to wait and see. But so far, countries like Japan have been pushing back pretty aggressively.
And the reason why I actually agree that the tariffs, the 135% tariffs at least, are never going to be enforced is two words actually: the bond market. The bond market is so freaking powerful. The fact that Trump, Liberation Day, he's like, I'm not going to cave. I'm definitely not going to cave. And then a few days later, he caves. It's because he saw the stock market. And Trump governs by the stock market. He said, panicans, don't lose your head. But remember TACO? You know what TACO stands for? Trump always chickens out. Did you see that viral?
Oh, come on. He's negotiating.
No, hold on. I'm not saying that he does.
I know. I'm not attacking you with that. I'm just saying it's like this is part of a negotiation.
I'm just saying that
I like orange chicken a lot better.
Oh, for God's sake.
I'm just saying that he's never going to impose these extremely high tariffs because his biggest supporters and the oligarchs are just not going to have it. People like, what's his name? Bill Ackman. Bill Ackman was losing his mind over the tariffs. People who don't, like Elon Musk, for instance, these people's net worth were decimated that week, Liberation Day.
And they rule the country. So.
Exactly. They run the country. There's no way that he's going to let the highest tariffs go into effect. But I also think he's extremely bothered by the TACO acronym. I think we shouldn't underestimate how much that kind of got under his skin. And that is why he's still playing the game right now. He's trying to position himself as a strongman. He loves strongmen, like from Kim Jong-un to Putin to Xi Jinping.
He didn't look like a strongman in his recent press conference with Netanyahu, where he deferred to him. He deferred U.S. foreign policy to Netanyahu. It was crazy.
Yeah, well,
or telling people to get over Epstein. Honestly, both of those instances.
Well,
those
were unfortunate, but that's one of the things that I love that we do here is we are not so partisan. We are willing to call out bullshit on either side. And I'm about to end it. Ames, do you have last thoughts on this one? I didn't let you talk.
Inflation has gone down. We're seeing it with gas prices. We are seeing it with eggs. We're seeing it with some of the promises that he made. He is fulfilling on some mandates. I don't want to come across as black pill anti-MAGA. The fact that I'm Australian certainly doesn't help because people are always like, why are you having opinions? You're Australian.
You're an American.
I want to believe. I mean, I've been here a decade, guys.
You've done it the right way.
I
don't want to hear that out of your mouth again. You are an American. You have every right to be here. You do your homework. You show up, and you care more than people who are born here.
I do care. I care
more of that.
I genuinely
Put my
believe.
foot down on
I
that.
genuinely believe that this is the last free country on this earth, so far as speech and so many other things go. And I want to protect it. I want to protect our economic solvency. I want to protect our freedom of speech. I want to protect our amendments. I hope that we continue going down a track that allows us to do so. I hope these tariffs in some ways gives us some agency to be able to do that. But I am fearful about retaliatory reactions from some of these countries that we do rely on as well.
We saw this movie before in the 1930s, and it ended in a world war. I'm just saying.
I'm not with you here.
I'm not saying that I'm against it.
I'm never optimistic, and I'm optimistic.
I'm cautiously optimistic.
Because it's mutually assured destruction. All right, are we done?
I think we're done.
Where do I find you when you're not sitting next to me tearing your hair out?
I'm all. I was just trying to like zhuzh it up a little bit. That's all. That's all. You can find me on The Young Turks, youtube.com/The Young Turks. I'm on Connect, so hit me up, send me a question. I'll most likely answer it. And you can also find me on Twitter at Ana Kasparian. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Amy Dangerfield across every platform. I'm the host of Dangerous Conversations on YouTube, and you can also connect me.
There's my camera. I'm Lindy Li on X. I'm also on Connect. I respond 100% of my questions.
She's a top connector right now.
Yes. I've gotten some weird questions, actually.
Please like, comment, share, subscribe. Thank you for watching.
Thank
We'll see you next time.